We laugh. We cry. We learn. But really, what doesn't kill you makes you better at managing clients and everyone. I'm Morgan Friedman, and this is Client Horror Stories. Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Client Horror Stories. I'm very excited to have with me Bryan Wetzel today. How are you doing, and what are you drinking today, Bryan?
I'm doing good, and I'm keeping it old school. I'm going with Guinness.
You can't go wrong with Guinness.
You cannot. That's a good thing to mix. You can mix stuff in it as well. And I'm representing a local brewery here in Georgia as well with my T-shirt. That was the
That's
one good
great.
thing about owning a restaurant and bar is that you get lots of free T-shirts from every vendor. So for a long time, people probably thought the only thing I wore were T-shirts with alcohol on them. Everyone's that guy's an alcoholic.
So there's an old business saying that no one ever got fired for hiring IBM, and I feel like, and it's a powerful business point. Like, okay, people will just cover their ass by hiring like the best, most prestigious, most famous. So if anything goes wrong, dude, I hired the best. Don't blame me. I feel like
Yeah.
there's a drunken analog to that of ordering Guinness. Like, can't
Ah,
go wrong. Like, there's no risk that you'll have a flowery drink that your friends will make fun of you. It'll always
right.
be good. It's like the IBM of beers.
It's consistent. And no one's going to say, well, I've never heard of that.
Every bar will have it. That
Yeah.
is that
Every
is
bar.
exactly right.
We used to
And
do, you drop a shot in the glass of whatever you wanted, and it would make it that much more potent. And we had a Christmas one that was Maker's Mark, that it was maple syrup flavored. And when you topped the top off, it smelled like a bottle of maple syrup. But we would do a shot and put it into Guinness for around the holidays. It was delicious, too delicious. And that raised the alcohol content quite a bit. It would sneak up on people. We'd have to warn them.
And with that drunken preface to get us in the right mood, I'm excited to hear your craziest client experience. Tell us the wild story.
Well, I have a lot of them I could have picked from after 25 years or more in having my own business. But probably the craziest one is there's a community in North Georgia. It's all inclusive, and it's beautiful. I still go up there now. I love it. But in the 90s, I started doing their advertising work for them, taking pictures, doing commercials, shooting promotional videos that would run in the real estate office. And I
Okay.
was loved up there, I thought, until the person who was in charge of advertising retired. And then one day I got a call from the owner's daughter who had taken over right out of college. And she said, we want to do a very, very nice video, 10-minute video with helicopter flyovers. This is before drones were a thing. Helicopter
Right.
flyovers. We want to have our
Brian,
own music.
I want to
Go
interrupt
ahead.
you for 1 second with a funny observation on that, where
Okay.
you had a great relationship. Then there's a changeover in the marketing leadership. Before we
Yeah.
even see what happens with the video that you sent, I I just want to point out there's this interesting religious analog. I'm viewing the Bible here as a literature. Pretend we're talking about Shakespeare, so there's
Mhm.
no religious implication here, which is the first book of the Old Testament is all about this like narrative arc of like the Jews escaping from Egypt through the Red Sea, selling Israel, and like Joseph saving the Jews and escaping from Pharaoh. And then the second book, Exodus, opens the first sentence
is a paraphrase that I don't remember the exact words, but paraphrase first sentence of Exodus is like, and the Pharaoh died, and a new Pharaoh came to rule Egypt that didn't remember all the good things that
Mm,
Joseph. And you're just knowing, oh, the marketing leadership change reminded me of that because there's
yeah,
this really powerful pattern where you'll work with an institution, you'll have a great relationship, things will be going great.
yeah,
Then just the employees change and they don't know you. And that introduces a
yeah.
whole other set of risk factors.
Well, on that note, I've had that happen several times.
Interesting.
Sometimes you lose the gig entirely. The new person
Oh,
comes in and they don't want to do what the other person did.
right,
They want it
right.
all to be their way, their people and whatnot. And there's really nothing you do about that. You try and be as friendly as you can to the new person. But I've also had it where, someone came in new and tried to undo everything the previous person did and the company had already paid for. And you're thinking to yourself, is the leadership of your company good with spending money to redo something that was finished by someone previous? And it's when you have to set aside and say, you know what, they're paying me. They want to redo it for 8 months, then we'll redo it for 8 months.
And great point.
My old house, my kids called it the Coca-Cola house because they did a project for Coca-Cola Enterprises that was supposed to be a month long. It went on for 17 months.
Whoa.
And I've had this happen many times. I'll get back to the original story, I promise. I've had this happen many times where the top people say they approved a storyboard and what a video is supposed to look like. The script is approved by them, and then they give it to the C-level people to run and get that done. And then the people in the C-level suite, well, they want to have their fingerprints on the project
Yes.
also. And so they don't want to be able to say, they want to be able to say, hey, you see that line? That was me. I added that line. Or we changed the colors of that background. That was my contribution. And so we kept changing and changing and changing, and it was getting really ridiculous. And finally, when the C-level people approved all the changes and I finished the edit, it went back to the top suite for them to approve. And they looked at
Right.
it and said, this isn't what we approved at all. Make it go back to. So fortunately, you back stuff up all
Yes.
the
Yes.
time. And so I was able to go backwards. I didn't tell them this, but I went back to the previous edit 17 months earlier and restored that and tweaked it and added some things that they did want to keep. But I got paid instead of a 4-week project, it was 17 months off and on. Um, and I put the down payment on our house from that paycheck. And so my kids always called our house the Coca-Cola house because
That's hysterical.
a project that probably was supposed to be $5,000 ended up being in close to 50 over 17 months. And it was just getting
Wow.
ridiculous where you were hiring a voiceover this is the thing. I guide people in the easiest way to get things done, most cost effective. One of the cost effective things is I will typically do the voiceover just as a scratch track. There's no reason to pay a professional if
Right.
you're not sure that the script is going to stay that way. And we kept paying a professional, and then they would make changes to the script and they would say, well, can't he's already been paid. You don't think he'll just come in and do one sentence? I'm like, no, that's not how
Not
contractors
how it
work.
works.
If I call him back to the studio for an hour, he's charging us for his time. So the person who did that gig, ran it, the project manager lost their job because the budget blew up. And I
Goodness.
assumed the whole time that they were getting everything approved, which wasn't true. But I didn't work for Coca-Cola, so it wasn't my responsibility to clear all that stuff. I was just doing what I was told. But anyway, back to the community in North Georgia. So I was doing work for them and I was loving it because I would barter time in their cabins. So like my wife and I could go and spend a weekend in one of the cabins and I would barter half of
Beautiful.
the pay and a little bit of time they had a little beach area and pool and stuff. It was a good thing for about 4 years. And then the owner's daughter called and said, we want to do a big project. It's going to have helicopter flyovers. We want professional voiceovers. We want to have a professional script. We have an ad agency that we're going to get to write it. And it was going to be a pretty expensive project for something much more expensive than they had ever done with me. And so I said, well, we're going to take a third down, which was my standard, and a third the day we show up on site, and then the other third when we finish. They gave me the third. I hire the helicopter pilot. I reserve the helicopter. I hire the writer. I hire somebody to get the music together. I've got all of the production assistants. Everyone's booked for the 4-day shoot. And the day before we were supposed to shoot, she calls up and says, well, a new channel on TV has come to us and said they will do it for free as long as they can run this video
Ooh.
at no cost. And I said, okay, I hate that because I'm losing the job. But then she threw in, so send back the money that we gave you. And I said, well, no, that's not
No.
how it works. And she said, well, your contract says that we can cancel within 5 days of production, and production starts tomorrow. And I said, no, it doesn't say production. It says from the start of production. And I said, and that means the day I put people on the books, contractors that I hired are going to want to get paid anyway.
Right.
They've reserved those dates and they can't book them now. We're only 1 day away from shooting. I said, and I've already got a helicopter pilot reserved. I got a writer. They're all getting paid something. And so they took me to court. I represented myself and I beat them.
You represented yourself and you beat
I've
them.
represented myself 4 or 5 times now. If it's a big case, I have a good friend who's a lawyer, so he will always look at it and say, you can do this, or he'll say, no, you don't need to go. Especially if it's state court, you don't want to go into higher court because you have to know the procedures and rules, or stuff will get tossed, or you'll get
But
tossed. And
just as a side note, I've never represented myself, and I would always assume there are like all these technical details. You need to file this form in this way, like that. So
yeah.
But like you just figured all that out yourself and did it. That's amazing.
Well, like I said, I have a good friend who's an attorney for years, so he will always give me some notes and heads up on things. When it comes to magistrate court, at least in the States, you can do that yourself. If you get a little bit out of procedure, the judge will just nudge you back over and say, you need to do this. That's what magistrate has been set up for. When you get to state court, you would be foolish to go in there by yourself if you're not an attorney, because they're going to have a good attorney at that level who is going to try and get everything you want to do thrown out and whatnot. But in any case, I won. I got to keep the money, and they actually had to pay me a little bit of money because I represented that I had more in bills from booking people than what the 1/3 would cover. So they weren't happy about that. Originally threatened to appeal. They dropped it, but I was kind of banished from this place at that point and didn't hear from them for a while. One day, I was producing a Beach Boys concert in the basement of the Ritz-Carlton in Atlanta. And the funny story about this is that I was in the back. I always tell this story. I go to the bathroom, I'm at the urinals, and 2 Beach Boys come in, 2 of the more famous ones, and they're peeing beside me. And I went out in the hall afterwards, and I called my mom and said, you're never going to believe this. I just peed between 2 Beach Boys. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I just peed next to 2 Beach Boys.
That's hysterical.
So I had to describe to her what that meant. That's probably not something that she's ever had anyone call her and tell her. But while I was there, I got a phone call from Big Canoe, and I didn't answer it because I didn't know what we weren't on good terms. I listened to the voicemail that night after everything was done, the job I was doing, and it was a lady who said, "I just joined Big Canoe. I had retired from an ad agency and I'm living here, but they have asked me to take over advertising." She said, "I looked at all this old stuff that you created and I liked it so much better. And that
It-
I know that probably don't want to hear from us, but I would love it if you came up and had lunch. I'd like to meet with you." And I was a bit hesitant, but I went up and she made me feel at ease that she was taking over and she knew what she was doing and she appreciated,
Question:
what had
how
happened.
many how many years after the court case was this?
About 5.
About 5. Okay.
About 5. So by that time, I figured I'd never hear from them again. I was
Right.
probably banished from even driving past the gate at that point. But I ended up doing work for them for the next 16 years until
Wow.
she retired and the owner sold the company to a corporation, of course. And but they treated me really well from that point on. And I remember the owner of the place was a very impending big guy. He used to play for the Raiders, but he went on to be a developer for several areas around Charleston and places. And I remember he walked up and shook my hand and said, "Welcome back." And I remember thinking, that was your daughter that fired me. why? Why are you telling me this? And I never really found out what went on behind the scenes, but apparently the video that they had created for free was not very good, and they weren't using it. And so I ended up getting the call because I had stuck to my guns. When I was doing work for them, I had done a great job, and they, that just sort of that's a rare one though, because rarely that just doesn't happen. It's very rare that someone would call you back after you've been in a court battle. But Anne, who had left, I think Ogilvy and Mather's agency, she was pretty high up. She saw what she saw and she said, "You know what? I want that guy. And I don't care what the rest of y'all say. This is what we need." So it
Wow.
began a great relationship. They were probably a quarter of my income for a good 16 years.
Wow. So
Yeah.
this is a great story, and there are a whole bunch of lessons from the story. Let's share some of the lessons. The first lesson that comes to mind is your enemy of today could be your friend tomorrow. You never know how much the circles can turn. Someone that you
Hmm.
like truly want to like go to hell and disappear, like literally
Yeah.
could be your best friend 5 years in the future. And as a consequence of that, when you are in a fight with someone, be careful. You don't want to be too dirty. You don't want to be too
All right.
personally insult them. You always want to be professional, even in the fight, because you might need them 5 years in the future.
Yeah. You never know. This is the thing, my take on it too is that I could have been a real asshole about it. I could have been rude I remember when you go to court, everybody is outside before I guess it's the bailiff or I don't know who it is, lets everyone in. And I walked up to them and their lawyer and the people I had been dealing with. And I said, "Look, you know, I love working for you guys, but I'm standing up for myself as well as the people that I have to pay, and I'm paying them on your behalf. So this is to me is only fair." And I said, "So, I don't know how y'all feel about it, but I'm just doing that. It's just business to me, and this is the right thing to do, and I'm paying them because it's the right thing to do, and I would love it if y'all paid me because it's the right thing to do." I
Right.
don't know if
So
that mattered. I have no earthly idea. But for one, I wasn't dealing with the same person when I came back. But I'm sure if I had been really, really rude, I would have been told, you know, or maybe Ann would have been told, no, we're not even calling that guy. Can't be around him. By the
So
way, I could have even been a jerk when got there, to the people who, because when I remember the first day I was walking the area where the offices are is fairly small, and there's some walkways between the different buildings. And I was running into people who I'd seen in court. I remember when I went up there, I said to myself, look, you're just going to be yourself. I'm not even going to bring up past stuff because there's no point, and we don't need to hash that again. If you want to do work here, you just need to let them move on, and you have to move on as well.
So actually, before we get back to the lessons, I have a question, although this might relate to the lesson. When you came back this second time, due to the past experience, did you insist on different terms? Like maybe instead of being paid a third up front, pay me 50% up front, or like some other measures to minimize the risk again?
Yeah. I'll tell you what's interesting about that. Anne, the lady, Anne Young, I'm going to say her name because she was the best. She recognized, because she had worked at an ad agency for years, so she was used to hiring for this stuff.
Right.
She said to me, "We're going to do 50% up front always." And she said, "And there'll be no, if we cancel, it'll be on us." She recognized that I might be a little bit gun shy about, doing business with them. One of the
Right.
things that I think that she recognized that Big Canoe didn't, or the rest of the people, was that they had pulled a big job from me that you know, I was prepared to be working on for the next 2 months,
Right.
including editing. And, that's not really fair. Like I booked myself as well and turned down other gigs. And here I am now. I didn't have any work for that month or two. And so she recognized that, and she was very sensitive to it. So when we first sat down, she let me know, I know what happened, and I know how you see it, and maybe you don't want to do business with us anymore, but hear me out. And I heard her out, and she seemed genuine. And she also seemed like she was apologetic for something the company had done that she had nothing to do with anyway. And so she won me over on that. Of course, I wanted to do the work, but if I had felt like they weren't going to be, like, if I had gotten up there and they said, look, we're going to give you more work, but we want you to take the 1/3 we already paid you and apply it to the next job, I would have said, okay, well,
No
I'm
way.
going to go home. So, you know, I think sometimes we forget how we handle ourselves, even when someone else is being an asshole to you, that could come back to bite you in the end. And honestly, people coming back to you after 5 years is probably rare, but it does happen, and you should be prepared for it. And you should also, you know, I was telling somebody a couple weeks ago, you never know because if you're dealing with a corporation or an agency, you never know when that person that you're dealing with is going to go to another one. And if they go to another one, you want them to hire you for the new place. But if you act like a jerk about something going on, they're going to say, I don't want to be, it's too much. I know another friend of mine who
Mhm.
had an issue with, I think it was a marketing firm, and he didn't get, they were just being very difficult. The lady who was the project manager left and went to another marketing firm or an agency, and they hired him over there. She did. And the reason she did was that she liked working with him, and she recognized that the drama that had happened at the previous location wasn't his fault. It was the people that worked there. But let's flip that around. Let's say that he
Mhm.
had acted over the top about it. And sometimes people lose their temper. He probably wouldn't have gotten work when she left again because she had seen a side of him that she didn't want to see again, and she can't really guarantee that there's no drama at the new job. When it comes to customer service stuff or client stuff, I always try and view, even when I had my restaurant and somebody complained about the food, I'd always look at it first and say, from their point of view, did we screw this up, or are they being unrealistic? When they canceled the gig and wanted me to give the money back, they were being unrealistic. And so I had to stand up for myself. But if it was an issue where I thought that maybe they had a point, I might have second guessed it and said, well, let's negotiate. I'll give you some of it back or whatever. I think, like, I often tell people that you never know who you're going to run into in life and who's going to hire you. So you got to be careful. When I was younger, I had a much faster temper, and that wasn't always a good thing. And you start to realize that, it is a small world. You'll run, especially if you work in a single industry, you will run into the same people more than once. And people talk. That's another thing. Let's say that the people at Big Canoe had begun talking to other places that I might have been able to get a job from. If I had been really, really difficult, that might have gotten around. As it turned out, when I went back to Big Canoe and started doing work, I actually
Mhm.
picked up other gigs from another community nearby. And then there was a place opening up down the road that was going to be sort of a
Oh,
museum. I got a job from there because the guy who ran it rather, lived in Big Canoe. So you never know where those tentacles are going to get you more work and more recognition. And you can cut those off by the way you act.
that is that is a great lesson. That it's not only if you act badly with the people you're in a war with, that like they may not come back to you. They won't if you act badly. But the people that work there will get other jobs. We'll talk to other people. Other people will see you,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
this is how reputations are made. I'll say it differently. Your reputation is not made for how you act when times are good for you. Your reputation is made
Right.
for how you act when you're under severe stress. So it's precisely a test of your character.
Yeah. A lot of people, not everybody is built for stress too. Sometimes people melt
Yes.
down or they get
Yes.
overwhelmed fast. I used to tell people when they would say, when my production company was doing a lot of bigger stuff, and we might have more than one project going on, and maybe there was a small shoot that was half a day, and somebody who had just started for me would say, well, I want to do it. And I wouldn't say this directly to him, but what I was thinking in my head was, I really want to see you under pressure first before I let you go and do something where that I'm not there to fix. I need to see because one of the things I always tell people, when it comes to production, nothing ever goes on as scheduled. Somebody's going to show up late. A hairstylist won't show up on time. I had a huge gig once where the audio board from one of the biggest rental companies in Atlanta for production, it just is what it is. Half the board died right in the middle of a concert.
Ooh.
Yes, and so the concert had to come to
Whoa.
a stop for 30 minutes while they drove down the road and got a new board, dropped it in, and started plugging everything in, and they didn't have time to do a sound check at that point because we're already supposed to be this was being shot to be sold in video and to air on
Ooh.
BET a week later. I wasn't the audio people, but the whole thing, it just, there's that stress on you, like
Well,
what's about to happen.
our
I'd love
story.
to see how people are, if they melt down under pressure, then I know that I have to put them in jobs where they're, you know, with somebody.
That is a test of whether they melt down or not. So
Yeah. Yes. Yes, and I wasn't, like I
Um,
said, I wasn't running audio, but it was still giving me heart palpitations. You got, because the crowd is starting to get gross, they're leaving. You want to have crowd shots. You don't want the crowd to be empty. They don't necessarily know how long it's going to be before they get the audio board fixed. I've never actually seen that before or even heard of it. But I mean, when it went down, we lost half the microphones on the stage.
Yikes. This is also a colorful example of a different lesson. You don't realize how many parts there are behind the scenes of anything that are needed
Hmm.
to make it run well. And like some little technical detail that no one even thought of goes
Hmm.
bad for whatever reason, you're screwed.
Yeah, you are. I remember we were doing a reality show on a golf course. I hired guys who could not only run the camera, but they could take it apart and fix it if they had to. And that had to
Oh,
be done a few times where they would
that's
have to get out
great.
the screwdrivers and start taking things off and getting something that was stuck or something that wasn't working. So I learned a long time ago, hire people who are good under pressure, under stress, and who are doers instead. Like I had a gentleman named Patrick. Patrick was a good-looking kid out of college. All the girls would work for me. Patrick. And Patrick was a good worker if you were with him, but if something went wrong, he would just sit down and wait for someone to come and help him. And that's not the kind of people you need when you're in a situation where time is, and production, when it comes to production, time is an issue. You have to get things done on time. Everybody shows up at a certain time. Everything's going on at a certain time. There's really very little leeway for, maybe we'll just do it tomorrow. You can't do that because that's a whole day of everyone getting paid. So you need people who work for you that can, even if something breaks, they say, you know what, I got to work around for this. I can fix this. I had a gentleman once, the plug on a live show, it kept unplugging. So they would lose the camera that was the screen behind the stage. And he rigged up something through his belt buckle. I was amazed.
Wow.
And he
Oh,
finished out the concert. I went up to him afterwards and I said, I need to see what you did because I need to know that for the future.
I love the story within the story here.
Yeah.
There's a great Brazilian slang word. In Brazilian Portuguese, they say the jeitinho or the jeitinho brasileiro. And what jeitinho means is like the ability when any problem happens, you like MacGyver, you take your belt bucket and like figure out how to make it work. And they often joke in Brazil, like the entire economy runs on the jeitinho, just everyone figuring out
Yeah.
impromptu band-aids for everything.
Yeah. Well, I had a boss one time tell me, said, when you hire people, look for whether they are problem solvers or problem identifiers.
Oh,
And I have taken that with me through life. I know this is off of customer service
yeah.
blunders, but yeah, this is a good lesson for everybody listening because I've taken this with me. And actually, when he told me this, it was a very awkward moment. So the man who hired me, I took his job 4 weeks later and he got flipped to doing my job. But he brought us both in the office to tell us that we were switching. And the gentleman who hired me was freaking out. Like, what, why is this happening? And he said, because Bryan is a problem solver and you are a problem identifier. Bryan just fixes the problems. You drive me crazy all day long coming to me with problems I don't need to know about. And then I asked him about it later. And he said, you will be so much more pleasant workplace if you hire people who are problem solvers. I have always looked at that and thought, oh yeah, like even when I had my restaurant, I had a couple people in the kitchen. If something wasn't working, they wouldn't skip a beat. They would say, we'll fix it later. We're going to do it this way. I wouldn't even hear about it till the end of the night. And I
But
love that.
so, question. I agree with this 100%. This is somewhat tangential from the original story, but super useful, and I love it. So
Yeah.
my question is, I agree 100%. I also only hire or only try to hire problem solvers, not problem identifiers. Question: when you interview people and you're considering hiring them, have you developed over the years any tricks to help you identify, or your sense of smell or instinct to see, okay, this person I'm
Mm.
talking to, I don't really know them, but I'm considering hiring them? Are they more likely a problem identifier or a problem solver?
Well, my only really good trick is that I often ask them to tell me about a situation that they were working on that didn't go as planned and how they handled it and what they learned from it. And what I'm listening for is whether I fixed it or whether it was somebody else's fault, it wasn't my fault. If they're blaming everything on someone else, that's to me is a key identifier of someone who is not taking responsibility, particularly if I'm hiring them for a position where they're in a position to be a project manager or managing people. The person at the top, if it gets screwed up, like when I was at, well, I guess the airplane mode not working. Uh, when I'm in charge of something, if it goes wrong, it's on me, and I have to take ownership of it. Even if somebody below me screwed it up, I'm supposed to be managing all of that. And if I hear somebody blame everything that I ask them on somebody else, that to me is a red flag. I want somebody to say that I should have been watching more closely. But this is the funny thing. I think sometimes they think if they say that it was probably something I should have managed better, that I'm not going to hire them. And what I'm looking for is honesty. And maybe they think that I'm looking for perfection when I don't think I'm ever going to find someone who's perfect. I'm not perfect. And if you pretend that you're perfect, I'm probably going to be hesitant to hire you. Everybody makes mistakes. Just admit it, and and move on. Don't throw your people under the bus.
I love that advice. I follow a very similar philosophy and advises him. I use different language for it, but it comes to the same point. And what one way I like framing
Mm.
this point is, Voltaire has a poem that ends in the phrase, translated into English, "The perfect is the enemy of the good."
Right.
And and what that means is, if you want things to be perfect, guess what? Nothing is perfect. You
Yeah.
are not perfect. So if you're pretending you're perfect or you aspire for this perfection, it's
Yeah.
not going to happen. It's going to be disastrous, and it means you're like, if you're claiming you're perfect yourself, you're probably a liar. So we have to like aim for the good, and then what I try to do is I try to aim for the good, but then implement processes, ways of working to constantly tweak, improve the good,
Yeah.
so we can get increasingly close to perfection.
Vince Lombardi, famous football coach, once said that we're always in pursuit of perfection, but we know we'll never get there. But as long as we're always trying to better ourselves in that pursuit, we will hopefully be the best we
Uh,
can every week.
I had never heard that quote before, but that is a less pretentious version of the same sort of
Yeah.
philosophy.
Sometimes when I'm hiring too, I'm always cognizant. I don't want somebody, particularly people who blame other people in their interview. If somebody's too narcissistic, I have found that they will have trouble with employees. And the reason is that employees who are doing the actual work, they know who's getting credit and who's not. And if you're if somebody you have is a little too narcissistic in the fact that it's never their fault, that will turn off. They will lose respect from the people they're managing very fast because the people below them see it for what it is typically.
100%. And that's a lesson on the lesson on the lesson that that is a good lesson as well. That you may think the people lower in the hierarchy don't realize what's happening, but they know what's happening.
Yeah, they do. I always tell people, look, treat everybody nice. We would work with celebrities occasionally. I always tell my people, I'm like, do not, even my kids, when they would come to set, I would say the crew works much harder than the talent, and be nice to them. It's easy to be nice to the celebrity because that's our culture. And sometimes we get excited that somebody is famous. And having worked with many famous people, they're not all the same. Some of them are very nice. Some of them are not, which is just basically the population that goes for whoever you meet. I used to tell my kids, you have to be nice to the crew. And I would tell even young people I was working for who were the talent, like, do not crap on the crew because they're the ones that make you look good, sound good. They're the ones that keep this thing going. You're a cog in this just like they are, and you shouldn't see yourself here and them down here. But a lot of times, the younger the celebrity, the harder that is. It's just hard. If I was 20 years old and someone gave me millions of dollars, I would probably be an asshole. You would, because it's just, you think that you're, so much more special. When you're young too, you don't see things for the fact that, you know what, in 5 years, you're probably broke again.
These are so many words of wisdom on so many different angles. I love how we used your original story as a opening point to get into many
Mhm.
other wonderful lessons. This has been super interesting, fun, educational, and even getting a little bit tipsy.
Well, this is a higher alcohol content than some beers, so
This has been great. Bryan, thank you for your time, for the words of wisdom. And everyone who's been watching this, thank you for watching. And we hope you made
thank you
it to
for
the end.
having me.
Yeah. And hope that all the viewers have both enjoyed this as much as we have and learned a bunch from this as well. Thank you, everyone. And until next time.